in the context of the Russian retreat from around the capital, Kyiv, how do you view the campaign developing in the next week or so?
Well, beyond how I view it, let's think about the Austrian chancellor just had a meeting. He's the first European leader to actually meet face-to-face with Vladimir Putin since the invasion. He was there yesterday. He came out of that meeting, emerging from that face-to-face talk with the Kremlin leader himself, saying he's pessimistic about peace prospects. That is the Austrian chancellor. And he sees, or he fears, the intensification of the brutality of this war. And I'll repeat that, intensification of the brutality of this war, as if this war, from what we've already seen, has not been brutal enough. So what does he fear specifically? He fears what we are seeing right now is a redeployment, a regrouping, if you will, of those depleted Russian forces, those demoralized Russian forces who retreated, yes, from northern Ukraine and from the suburbs around the towns around Kiev, into Belarus, being redeployed from Belarus territory towards the east of Ukraine, towards the entire Donetsk and Luhansk regions. You'll know that since 2014, there've been that region itself's been subdivided into an area that was controlled by pro-Russian separatists and has remained so for the past 8 years, and then a broader region, which was still Donetsk and Luhansk, all part of the broader Donbass region, which was under the control still of the Ukrainian army. That is what Putin is aiming to change in what lies ahead. He is pouring troops, he is pouring artillery, he is pouring vehicles into the area. They will be facing, however, again, fierce, not to overuse the word, but fierce Ukrainian resistance, because the forces that are deployed in the east, while far outnumbered by the Russian forces that they're expecting to be arrayed against them, they are battle-hardened. They have been there, as I said, for 8 years. They have dug trenches. They have, in some cases, have almost fortified towns. They are ready for the Russians, in a sense. And the Russians are going to adjust their battle plan accordingly. The fear is that the Russians will be using not just artillery that fires straight out at a target, but artillery that will fire missiles into the air to land from the air on targets, into these embankments, these earth banks, these trenches. This is what lies ahead, trench warfare. We heard the Ukrainian foreign minister just last week after his meeting with NATO foreign ministers. He addressed the world, well, reporters, but the world by extension, saying worse is yet to come, understatement to say the least. And he said, what you're about to see in eastern Ukraine will unfortunately remind you of World War II, and perhaps even World War I, because that's where the trench warfare was the worst. That's what lies ahead, no matter how battle-hardened these Ukrainian forces are. The Russians will now have an easier time resupplying and redeploying forces because they have a railroad network they will be able to use. They will be closer to their own territory, better connections and supply networks. It is going to be brutal, and it is going to be extremely, perhaps prolonged.
And we've been hearing today from Vladimir Putin himself, a rather rare public appearance from him. He's using language like noble to describe the Russian war in Ukraine and saying, actually, he had no choice but to invade. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, we've made so much about reading Putin's mind. What is he thinking? No one can read his mind. We don't have to read his mind. He's telling us, he's spelling it out exactly what he's thinking. He's thinking what you said, that this has been a noble cause, a noble war. Yes. What's happening in Ukraine is a tragedy. What he fails to say is that it is a tragedy of Putin's own making, an unprovoked war that did not have to happen. It could end right now, right after I get off set right now. It could end if the Russian troops were to withdraw. What he basically said today is he put it in these fatalistic terms. He says this was, yes, a tragedy, but an inevitable war, a war in which he had no choice. And he said all of this on a day in which he was in Russia's Far East on Cosmonauts Day, 61 years to the day since the first Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin was fired into orbit, first man in space. He was with Alexander Lukashenko, his ally in this war, the man from whose territory in Belarus these Russian troops are now arraying and preparing to be poured into the eastern territories. Vladimir Putin, with Lukashenko, said that he is going to make sure, counter any Western sanctions against Russia and Belarus. They are going to deepen their integration as a result of this war. This is not going to hold Russia back at all. Just the opposite. Russia's more determined than ever. And he says that he has no doubt his war will be successful. He has absolutely zero sign of backing down. My impression is that this is a man who is more determined than ever, more convinced of the righteousness of his cause, no matter how delusional that may sound, and more ready to take on those Ukrainian forces, wherever they may be.
Douglas Herbert.